Hello and welcome to course 81059, Customizing Microsoft Dynamics 365 for Sales and Customer Service. My name is Derek Borman and I will be your instructor. One of the first things that you will notice for this course is it used to be called Customizing and Configuring Microsoft Dynamics 365, but because of all the content that we've had in past modules, we decided to actually split it up into two separate courses. So this course will focus more on the actual customizing of the application, whereas the configuration course will focus more on the how to set things up and configure different elements of the application like emailing and auditing and some of those types of things. So for this course, we really want to focus on a few different things, primarily just introducing you to the customization topics of Microsoft Dynamics 365, looking at just how it's customized, what some of the different options are. Go ahead and show you how to create solutions, how to actually package your customizations together. So if you want to deliver those to, a customer, or you want to deliver those to like a UAT environment or a production environment, how you can go ahead and package those together and what some of the options are around that. We'll explore field and entity customizations, showing you how to create new entities in the application, both regular entities as well as activity entities, and then show you how to create some of the different fields and introduce some of the new field customization options that are available. We'll look at how to create relationships for individual entities and how to define those relationships so you can link two entities together, whether that's through a lookup field or maybe even through some of the new customer functionality that's available. We'll show you how to go in and tailor your forms to customize specific forms to your needs, how to add different tabs and sections, and really organize things around so when you're presenting that as part of your solution, your customers and the people using the application will really be able to go in and have a more personalized experience. We'll also look at how to create views in the application as well as visualizations, including dashboards and charts, and how to lay that information out not only for how it's going to be presented in the web client, but how it might be presented through like the Outlook application and some of those items. We'll look at business rules and we'll show you how to create business rules, which will be kind of the equivalent to your client-side scripting in the application. There's also, as part of Dynamics 365, they've actually introduced a new business rule editor. So we'll introduce the new business rule editor and show you how to design those business rules. And then finally, we'll walk through some of the just customization considerations that you want to think about for Interactive Service Hub if you're a service-based organization and you want your customers to use that interface, or as well as mobile. So what are just some of the little subtle differences that you have to keep in mind as you're setting up and customizing the application to fit your needs? So in this module, we are going to go ahead and explore the basic concepts involved with customizing a Dynamics 365 environment. We want to walk you through just the individual things that you're going to do to really set this up and get this working. So we want to talk basically about some of the following information. Just provide really an overview of Dynamics 365. What does it look like now with some of the new changes that have come in there and some of the basic customization capabilities that you'll be looking with? We want to talk a little bit about how your end users and the people who will be actually consuming the application will connect to CRM, because that's also going to play a little bit of a factor into how you customize and set up your environment. Now, for the most part, it's pretty straightforward in the fact that it's kind of a build once, deploy in multiple situations, but there's just little things that you want to keep in mind to optimize it as much as possible for the presentation environment that people are going to be working with. We're going to talk just a little bit about some of the supporting items that might work around the application as well, and then just give you a very brief and generalized overview of some of the 365 customization principles that are out there so you understand what we're really going to be diving into in more detail as we move through the remainder of the course. What is Dynamics 365? At its core, Dynamics 365 is a business model that allows multiple apps to work together seamlessly to provide cloud-based solutions for customers. So if you think about it, when you're running your business, you've got multiple tiers to that business. Some of you might be more of a sales-orientated business. Some of you might be more of a, customer service related business, but all businesses have certain business needs, whether it's financials, reporting, different types of situations that come into there. So what the Dynamics 365 platform allows you to do is really deploy more customized solutions that fit your target business, as opposed to having to try to fit them into one container based upon your individual needs. So you'll have additional apps that you can download from sources like AppSource that would actually allow you to bring in specific functionality into your organization that that would allow it to work more in line with what you're trying to accomplish. Now, at the same point, it's still built off of the whole concept of the XRM framework. And the reason why the XRM framework is important is because that's really what gives you more of the anything scenario when you start talking about building this to fit your needs. So for example, if you're talking about, creating a partner-based application, the X could represent, partner relationship management, or you could be looking at employee relationship management. But by customizing and extending the application, you now have the capabilities to build very powerful XRM applications that allow you to make this work the way that you want to and extend some of the baseline functionality that's available based upon whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish from an organizational standpoint. The XRM framework really gives you the capabilities to leverage certain things like security, how people are going to access into the application, how you're going to report on that information, how you're going to build the user interface to allow people to actually do things the way that they want to work things, and then how you're going to handle some of the automation processes and how you're going to handle building the database structure within the application. So why would you actually customize this? Well, as I mentioned, you're looking for specific situations that are going to work based upon how you want to provide your functionality. And so you may have customized business processes that are used to guide people through the selling process, or customized business process that are used to guide people through the case resolution process. So you want to make sure that when you're tailoring this application, you're tailoring this to fit your specific needs, whether that's implementing specific business processes or going in and making design changes to forms and charts. Those are all elements that are going to allow you to really personalize this experience to either you as an organization, or if you're a partner doing this for other customers, to those customers as they're working through. The nice thing is you can kind of take some of this baseline functionality, and there's a lot of pre-built things that will be available on sources like AppSource and some of those items to allow you to really extend it and build it quickly. But at the same point, you're still going to take a lot of those baseline solutions, regardless of how you've achieved those, and customize those to fit your specific needs. And so that's really what we want to look at as we're going through, is how you're going to build that customization option to really fit when you're moving forward. So from a CRM perspective, there's a few different elements that you're going to use. It comes kind of out of the box with different modules based upon how you've purchased that information from your Dynamics 365 subscription. And that's going to include things like sales and marketing and some of your baseline customer service functionality. But again, using the framework that's available, this is what allows you to go ahead and define how you want users to experience this information. Because you're not necessarily going to use the application just out of the box. What you're typically going to do is go in and actually define different security roles based upon what it is that you want to do, define different client and server functionality for how people are going to integrate with the application, and really provide a way to manage how these customizations are going to be deployed out to your customers as they're moving forward. Before you actually go in and start designing your own customizations to really extend how the application works, you really want to make sure you take some time to understand what's built into the application. And the reason why is because that's really truly going to drive how you build and define your customizations. I see a lot of times when I work with people that they try to over-customize the application. They don't take into consideration things like the account record and the contact record, things that are already there. And those were built that way for a very specific reason. So if, for example, if you're going to use like vendors within your application, there's no point for you to really go out and create a vendor entity, because the account entity already has a way of flagging them as vendors. And if you use that built-in functionality, you now can just kind of tailor that account screen to fit your specific needs, and at the same point in time still be able to use it for things like marketing lists and some of those items. Plus, the application has different functionality built into it to allow you to make it easier to actually customize that stuff. For example, from a process tracking and automation perspective, it comes with things like workflows and dialogues and business process flows, things that you can use to update records automatically or add additional functionality to items based upon your specific needs. Or if you really are looking for things that are going to interact from a client-side perspective, you can do things like business rules and calculated fields and roll-up fields. And by leveraging some of the out-of-the-box customization capabilities capabilities that are there. It makes it much easier for you to start building and defining what this information is without actually having to leverage a developer. And that's really the new messaging around the whole Dynamics 365 platform, is we want to be able to extend and create very customized solutions without actually having to go out and engage through a developer to build those items from the ground up. And we want to use the core functionality that ships as part of the application. Let's talk just a little bit before we get into the customization methodology about the actual experience that users will see. So Dynamics 365 basically allows you to work in several different ways. Traditionally, you'd be looking at using things like the web client, and the web client still exists and works from an application perspective, but also you have to keep in mind that a lot of your users might use things like the Outlook client and the phone and the tablet client. So we want to talk a little bit over the course of these next several slides just about what those different environments look like. And so again, when we start talking about the Dynamics 365 experience for users, we start talking about things like the traditional web client and the Outlook client, as well as the mobile applications, as well as phone and tablet. But that also could be a completely customizable client. One of the things that you see now with Power Apps and Flow and the Common Data Model is people going in and creating very targeted, specific applications for internal usage that will connect directly to CRM or to the Common Data Model to allow them specific functionality, maybe for things like updating leads or updating contacts, something that might be very targeted for a business use case. And that's what's nice about the 365 experience, is you do have the capabilities to really tailor it to your specific needs. So the first one obviously is the web client. And from a web client perspective, you have the ability to use a variety of different supported browsers. It obviously works with Internet Explorer 10 and 11 as well as Microsoft Edge. It does work with the most up-to-date versions of Firefox, Chrome, and Safari. So when you are customizing your application, you do want to go into those browsers and just test it within those browsers, particularly if you are going to have clients that are going to be using them, just to make sure that it does function as expected. And in most situations it will. There's very few situations where it doesn't, but you still want to double check just to be safe. The other option that you'll see a lot of times is people working in Outlook. And you hear a lot of times, from a 365 or from a Dynamics 365 perspective, they say, if you know how to use Outlook, you're 25% trained on Microsoft Dynamics 365. And that's somewhat true from an application perspective, but it's important to note that people will be working with it inside Outlook. And there's a couple of different ways that they can access it through Outlook. They can either use kind of the traditional Outlook client, where you actually install it into the Outlook environment and you can work with records offline, and you can work with contacts and accounts, and you can synchronize some of that information back and forth. But there's also the app for Outlook as well, and this is an item that can be deployed at an organization level that actually allows people to access the application through things like OWA and still have that same baseline CRM or CRM-based functionality without having to go in and install something directly onto the client computer or the client item. One of the whole deploy once, build once, deploy in multiple scenarios is the whole mobile message. And they've spent a lot of time with Dynamics 365 making sure that from a mobility perspective, it's just as easy to customize this as it is to customize any other aspect of the application. And so when you build a customization, and you'll see this when we get into the form module, we actually build forms. Those forms, when we deploy them, will be automatically adjusted to be presented on mobile applications, whether that's the tablet application or the phone application. And there's a little bit different of look and feel on some of those items, but you do have the capabilities to work with them. Some of the key things you'll notice from a tablet perspective is you do have the capabilities to work with offline data, and you have the capabilities to open things up in a browser and have a much wider kind of real estate area to work with. Whereas from the phone, obviously you're dealing with a smaller form factor, but you still have the capabilities to do things like hide things specifically from the phone interface. So when users are working through items, if it's something that's not really going to present well on that phone interface, you can work through that. And again, we have a whole module that talks specifically about customizing and tailoring for mobile, so we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But other options that you might be looking at, I mentioned the completely custom client. That might be something that you would use building, with something like Power Apps or something like that to go out and kind of facilitate that. But then you would also have things if you're working for a call center where you might have things like Unified Service Desk, which is a desktop application that allows you to not only connect directly to Dynamics 365, but it also allows you to connect to other line of business applications in your organization. And what's nice about this is this would really provide you, from a call center perspective, this whole concept of session management, where you can go in and you can work with multiple sessions at one time, and those sessions might contain one specific customer and all their cases that are working with it, as well as external applications that you can work through. And the nice thing about the Unified Service Desk interface is this is all something that, from a configuration perspective, can be done within the Dynamics 365 interface. So one of the things you want to always keep in mind as you're customizing is, how are people going to be accessing this, and are there any little things that I need to do just to make sure that, from a presentation perspective, everything is going to be optimized based upon the client that they're using or the presentation method that they're using to actually work with and see the application. So one of the key elements to customizing a Dynamics 365 experience is what's called the platform layer. And the platform layer is really the intermediary between the software developer and the database itself. This is what gives you all of the different APIs and methods that you're going to use to actually go in and handle communication within the context of the application. So it has a variety of different responsibilities that it actually does when you're moving through. The key responsibilities of the platform are really just to control how people access the application. So this is really what's going to look at your security functionality inside the application. And again, if you look at the new configuration course that's available, we spend a lot of time talking about how to set up security and work with items, but that's one of the key elements that interfaces with the platform layer, and that's accessing security to the application. It's also going to control access to the database. Who has the capabilities to go in and do some of the things that we're going to talk about throughout this course, such as creating custom entities, creating new fields, and working with items from that standpoint. This is also what's going to go in and actually process events in the application itself. So when somebody does something like create a new record or update a specific item in the application, this is what's going to raise specific events. So things like workflows and custom actions and other custom business logic that you have in the application can actually be fired and triggered and do something specifically as part of that situation. For the most part, everything that you're going to do, with the exception of reports, which interact just a little bit differently from an application standpoint, interact with Dynamics 365 through what are called web services that are actually accessed through the Dynamics 365 platform layer. So this is really going to be kind of your core communication to the application itself. And this is really what's going to provide the entire infrastructure that you're going to use to actually go through and create a complete Microsoft Dynamics 365 application within your organization. With any customization options that you're looking at, you really have to look at how all of these customizations are going to interact with each other and how you're going to go ahead and implement these. So for example, you might have a development environment that you use to create a lot of these baseline customizations, but at the same point, you then have to go ahead and transfer that to like a UAT environment and then ultimately to a production environment. And so it's important to understand that when you are customizing these, how are these items going to work? And so you really need to look at them from a deployment perspective. How are you going to package these items together and deploy these customizations? Are you creating baseline functionality that's going to be used by other people within your organization? So if so, how can you package these items that will make it optimally ideal to reuse these customizations moving forward? And then also, do you have situations where you're going to be, maybe creating your own kind of standalone ISV product? Maybe ultimately your goal is to have something that would be available within AppSource that customers could download and install into their environment. That's a little different customization methodology in regards to how you're going to build those solutions, because they need to be able to work very specifically with different types of environments. And then ultimately, you also have to look at things like, if if you are going to engage a developer to work with you in the application, how are they going to create these customized items using things like the Dynamics 365 SDK. So the methodology around how it would be customized gives you a lot of flexibility to determine exactly what it is that you want to do based upon the type of delivery mechanism that you're working through. When you start customizing the application, think of your customizations as enhancements. So depending upon what the needs of your organization or your customer might be, those customizations or enhancements could range from being very simplistic functionality where you're adding a field to a form or making a very simplistic change, to very complex where you have a very highly integrated business process that needs to be brought into the application so users can be guided through different situations. Regardless of whatever it is that you're looking at, one of the first things that you always want to do is you don't want to necessarily just customize the system for the sake of customizing the system. You really want to spend some time with your customers and understand what the business requirements are for that particular use case in that organization. Those business requirements really should be what are going to be driving the changes inside the application. So if they want to have a very highly integrated case resolution process, we want to make sure that we understand what that case resolution process looks like, so as we're building these customizations, we can define the very specific elements needed to work through that. And then an ideal environment that you're going to be working with is going to have a very nice balance. It's going to have, not necessarily just everything out of the box, but I haven't necessarily gone in and changed every aspect of the application to tailor to every single user. I've got a nice balance between what was shipped with the application and what's specifically needed from an application standpoint based upon the business needs of my customers. So there's a lot of different customization options that are available, and we're going to get through a lot of these as we work through this course. But some of them, just some of the baseline situations would be what are called schema changes, or actually going in and making database modifications. This would include things like adding and renaming different columns within the application, creating new tables to store information inside Dynamics 365, going in and actually creating what's called a new entity. So for example, entities are things like accounts, contacts, opportunities. You may find that you need a new entity based upon your specific needs, maybe for bank account or something like that. This would give you the capabilities to go out and define what those different situations are. So while it does ship with kind of a standard set of system entities like accounts, contacts, so on and so forth, you could create your own items based upon those specific situations. So you could go in and create different entities, you could remove attributes, maybe there's specific fields that you no longer need, or maybe you even want to go in and create a lookup field or a relationship between two different tables within the application. You do have the capabilities to do that as part of the different customization options that are available. Another area that you'd be looking at would be forms. And so forms are really what you're going to use from an application perspective to enter information into the Dynamics 365 application. And so when you start talking about creating form customizations, we might be looking at things like modifying a specific form, reorganizing where things are laid out on there, adding new tabs, adding sections, rearranging those items to make it easier for users to actually enter data into the application. One of the biggest things that oftentimes gets overlooked sometimes is there's a lot of fields that might be on forms based upon just default functionality. Those may not even apply to you and your organization. And if that's true, you might as well just go in and remove them from the form. You do have a lot of different options as far as how things are laid out, how things are presented. And when we get into the form customization module, we'll spend a lot of time talking specifically about what those different elements are and how you can use those and leverage those as you're moving forward. Same thing with views. Views are really just lists that return information based upon specific criteria. So for example, I want to see a list of all of the accounts that I own inside CRM. I could create a view, or I could use a view to work through that. The nice thing about views is you have a lot of options to modify how those views are presented. I can do things like add fields or remove fields to control what specific fields are displayed on the view. I can modify specific filter criteria to fit my specific needs. I can add sorting. I can modify the width of these columns. I can really truly go in and define specifically what this column and what this view is going to look like inside the application. And then I also have things like charts and visualizations, and these are elements that I can do to go in and create, different visuals that people can interact with. They can go in and they can have a chart associated with opportunities, and when they click on that chart, it'll actually drill into different levels of those opportunities so I can see the specific data that is being presented as part of those individual visualizations. Same thing with dashboards. Gives me the capabilities to go in and take multiple items like several lists and several charts and actually group them into one view. So when I'm working through and defining what some of those different elements are, I can see those first and foremost and I can work with them very specifically. And again, we'll get into a lot of the charts and dashboard customizations when we actually get into the views and visualizations module, but these are some of the baseline customizations that you can build for a CRM environment. One of the last things that you have from a customizations perspective are what are called solutions. And in the next module, we'll spend quite a bit more time delving into solutions and the specific details around them. But the nice thing about solutions is as people who are developing these customized solutions, you can package everything together inside a solution. And the advantage to that is now you're working with a very smaller subset of components instead of every single thing that is available within that Dynamics 365 environment. The nice thing about this is by grouping these individual smaller components together, you can really classify them as related items as part of a solution. And now I can take these items, maybe I'm building a financial wealth management solution or something like that. I might have entities around bank accounts and security roles and different things that really need to be brought into there. So I can group these items together as a package, and then I can export them out of one environment in a zip file and then import that item together. And the nice thing about that is once I create that zip file and I really package that zip file out, I now have the capabilities to keep that for in the future when I may need to actually go out and do some other things with it. Maybe I need to deploy it to another environment. Maybe something has changed and I want to start with that base solution. It also does allow me to have kind of a nice starting point. And then finally, from an extending standpoint, which obviously this is not the scope of this training, but the other thing to look at is, there are still going to be times where you may not be able to build all of the exact functionality that you're looking at. So one of the things that Dynamics 365 does allow you to do is to go in and extend that functionality. And people with development capabilities can actually go out and create different types of plugins and different .NET solutions that would allow people to interact more extensively with not only the Dynamics 365 platform, but maybe with some other custom applications that you might have inside your organization. But again, this isn't necessarily something that's within the scope of this training, but it's also important to note that it is a possibility. If you ever need to, you can engage a developer to really take what you've done from a customization standpoint and extend it on based upon specific business use cases. As you can see from this module, there's a lot more to customizing Dynamics 365 than really just going in and adding a couple fields here or there. You really want to take some time to understand specifically what the business requirements are and then determine if the out-of-the-box functionality can provide you what you need or if you really need to go out and create additional items around that. And then you can start defining how you want to build and customize the application itself. And so the application itself does give you kind of that specific set of APIs that allow you to determine how you want to interact with the database and use those as the building blocks to work with the application itself. But in addition to that, there's a lot of different tools and utilities built inside the actual Dynamics 365 application that allow you to create what are called supported customizations. And by supported, that really means that you're doing those specifically within the Dynamics 365 user interface. You're not necessarily going in and modifying the database directly. And that's one of the biggest things to remember is anytime you want to make a change, you do want to do it through the actual application itself. Over the rest of this course, we will actually go in and start looking at each one of the items that we talked about in this module more specifically and show you how those customization areas can be used to really truly build tailored, customized solutions that are going to fit your organization needs as well as the needs of your customers.